Media's practice in Joe Arpaio's Old West. Alarmed by the pandemonium coming from the nearby house on Monday, March 21st, 2011, Deborah Ross called 911. But when she went outside, she was stunned to find that the police were already on the scene, that it was, in fact, the sheriff's office, along with a dozen SWAT members, armed vehicles, a robot, and a tank that were leading the assault on the neighbor's home in order to execute a search warrant that would lead to the arrest of one Jesus Lores. Recounting the absurdity of the situation, the reporter later said, "The tank came in and pushed the wall over, and you see what's in there? All it was a bunch of chickens." Perhaps Romps was in too much shock to notice, but riding in the tank was none other than the Kung Fu B-movie action hero star himself, Steven Seagal, who was filming his latest episode of Lawman. Well, welcome to Maricopa County, where America's toughest sheriff reigns, or did for quite a long time. Here, media is more than mere information. Reality and illusion conspire, and nothing is as it seems. In this paper, we argue that media is not a static textual representation in which meaning is inscribed, but rather an ongoing iteration that performs identity and produces subjectivities. Joe Arpaio offers a unique case of identity performance through media, where the performance continually generates and empowers a simulacra of myth and identity. We begin by providing a geographic and political context in which to situate Arpaio's performance. Next, we'll touch on the few theoretical orientations regarding media's practice. Following this, we present several of the primary illustrations of how Arpaio uses the media to perform his identity, including through the tank, the posse, and Tent City. Finally, we consider some media expressions of resistance to Joe Arpaio's reign. In the common vernacular, Maricopa is simply Phoenix, or the Valley of the Sun, the desert metropolis 6 hours east of Los Angeles. Phoenix has become a destination and transition node for Hispanic immigrants. In 2010, the state passed one of the most severe anti-illegal immigrant bills, Arizona Bill SB 1070. This bill mandated that all immigrants keep registration documents with them at all times, that law enforcement determine immigration status during any lawful interaction with an individual if given reasonable suspicion that the individual is in the state of Arizona illegally. Arizona has long been seen as a bastion of American conservatism. This legacy can be traced back to the rise of Mr. Conservative himself, Barry Goldwater. In 1960, Goldwater wrote The Conscience of a Conservative, which propelled him to political stardom and rekindled the American conservative movement. John McCain, who replaced Goldwater in the Senate, claimed that Goldwater transformed the Republican Party from an Eastern elitist organization to a breeding ground from which the election of Ronald Reagan can happen. Arpaio's performance actively constructs a geographical imaginary of Maricopa in order to naturalize his extreme practices in the public eye. This naturalization is achieved through Arpaio's performance of his self-ascribed identity, America's toughest sheriff, a lone ranger on the frontier who is willing to do what the lesser man will not or cannot do. According to Judith Butler, performativity must be understood not only as a singular or deliberate act, but rather as a reiterative and citational practice by which discourse produces the effects that it names. Joe Arpaio's performance has two important dimensions. In one sense, it is a traditional lived through his daily experiences and practices. In another sense, it is mediated, and that is what we focus on in this presentation. There are two important points to understand Arpaio's mediated performance. First, owing to the reproducibility of events afforded by technology, or what has come to be known as replay culture, Arpaio's performance exists as an ever-accessible archive of his actions that, as such, magnifies the performance's iterative and public dimensions. Bernard Stiegler argues that the temporal objects that media have a particular force of persuasion on the mind, which can be attributed to the unique operations of temporal objects vis-a-vis consciousness and memory. Stiegler develops the notion of tertiary memory, where memory becomes the prosthetic memory of the cultural consciousness, thus extends beyond the original performance. Through the prosthetic memory of the media and its endless playback culture, Arpaio's mediated antics mobilizes identity and allow it to become part of the substratum of popular thought. The second important thing to understand about Arpaio's performance is that it is a relation of power, one that enacts the performer's identity as a social being at the same time that it forms subjects by operationalizing power to subordinate others. By defining the self as white, lawful, rational, and masculine, it also serves as a mechanism by which to render others as brown, irrational, illegal, and feminine. In Arpaio's first book, America's Toughest Sheriff, How We Can Win the War on Crime in 1996, he lays out the central troops used to perpetuate his ideology. These troops include the tank, the posse, tent city, pink underwear, and chain gangs. In this presentation, I focus on the first three of those troops. One of Arpaio's key tropes is the acquisition of a U.S. military tank, which serves as a spectacle wherever the public is present. The tank works by associating Arpaio with toughness and promotes the popular ideology of war on drugs and the war on crime. The tank is not a static trope, can be adapted to different subjects and policies, especially when combined with the cold case posse and the celebrities such as Shaquille O'Neal or Steven Seagal. Arpaio's most successful and enduring trope is the outdoor prison, tent city. Entwined in the old Korean War and World War II military tents that make up the prison are unrelated fields of imaginary and style that provide the central symbolism of Joe Arpaio's ideology and power. Describing his vision beyond Tent City, Arpaio explains, the Statue of Liberty embodies freedom. The tomb of the unknown soldier represents the sacrifices and suffering of our fighting men and women. Well, in a similar symbolic way, Tent City Jail can stand for a new approach to crime and punishment. To add a melodramatic flair to the new jail, Arpaio opened the facility at high noon on August 2nd, 1993. The sardonic sign outside the prison advertised that after 19 years in business, it had served nearly 500,000 people. Tent City signage exhibited in Arpaio's office is another way that Arpaio's ideology is communicated. It is controlled conditions the camera can abide the rule of thirds, offsetting Joe to the left and giving an ideological script of Tent City signage for all to read on the right. Together, those signs affirm Joe's get tough on crime message and the idea that even in these economically difficult times, there's always room for more prisoners in Tent City. Arpaio's harsh immigration policies and enforcement tactics have forced a strong Latino and ally oppositional movement expressed through the music and arts ranging in genres from country to rap and many in between. Arpaio's infamy lives on, for instance, in the song Maricopa by Connor Oberst's Midwest punk rock band Desparcidos, the song of which is intentionally misspelled in reference to Arpaio's assertion that it was an honor to be compared to the Ku Klux Klan, is written from the perspective of Arpaio's supporters in order to satirize the fear and hatred of illegal immigrants. more direct criticism comes from rap artist Chingo Bling in his song Fuck Arpaio. In this song, the rapper rhetorically asks, what do you get when you mix fear with ignorance in a country that was built by immigrants? Before moving on to critique Jan Brewer, SB 1070, and Pink Underwear.
Hold up. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, you in denial. We built this city, you can't deny it. Backbreaking labor, we supply it. Look, what do you get when you mix fear with ignorance in a country that was built by immigrants? 1492 was the year that they appeared. We was here, they came over here. The land of the free, you know you can't lie to me. Other shit at play here, this ain't about a kind of.
I'm from Maricopa County where we say fuck Arpaio. And if the sheriff don't like it, he could take me to trial. Stand me in front of the judge with the crooked ass laws. Throw me in the cell with pink socks and drawers. Violate my civil rights, but we making a stand. Don't blame Arizona, blame Governor Jan. It's time for revolution and reprimand. So fuck 1070 and the devil is planned. In Maricopa County we say fuck Arpaio, fuck Arpaio, fuck Arpaio. In Maricopa County we say fuck Arpaio, fuck Arpaio, fuck Arpaio.
One of the most powerful images of opposition to appear has been Francisco Garcia's mural Para al Arpaio. Through an image of a divided face, the mural illustrates the schizophrenic perception of Latinos in Arizona. On the left, we see Cesar Chavez, the later Libre and civil rights activist born in Yuma, Arizona. This half of the mural is of the United Farm Workers flag and people united to march for immigration reform and the DREAM Act. On the right side of the mural, we see Joe Arpaio, the Arizona flag, and the masked Maricopa County Sheriff's Office pointing a gun at the viewer. Garcia describes this image and his intentions, saying, as you walk from left to right while staring at the gun barrel, you notice that the barrel is following you. The mural is painted to give the viewer an experience of what immigrants in Arizona are feeling, intimidation with the fear of deportation. As Althusser points out, with interpolation comes the possibility of misrecognition, the failure for ideology to correctly form the subject in its own image. As Althusser points out, with interpolation comes the possibility of misrecognition, the failure for ideology to correctly form the subject in its own image. Drawing from Althusser and Foucault, Butler highlights the ambivalent nature of this subject by showing how subjection is simultaneously the external power that operates on the individual and also the internal reconstitution of that same power. It is this dual effect of power, Butler explains, that makes the resignification of injurious interpolations by the offended party possible. In other words, what was once an attempt to injure to transform into a source of positive identity by using it as the center of shared resistance. It is this resistance and agency on the part of the subjects in reformation that Arpaio attempts to deny when he insists that even anti-Arpaio statements and media are good because, in his words, regardless of how the media positions his words or actions, the message gets through to the people. This attempted foreclosure is, however, merely one attempt by Arpaio to maintain a hegemonic identity and power of subjection. Only time will tell whether he will be successful and for how long. At the time of the writing of this paper, the reign of Arpaio continued through his ongoing performance of tropes and controversial practices. This mediated performance allows Arpaio to maintain his office and territorial control over Maricopa. The performance of his identity resonates spatially as it contrives Maricopa as the backlot of Joe Arpaio's Wild West show. The production of Joe Arpaio has nothing to do with information, but rather with the creation of his own mediated world. It is a simulacra, one that produces subjects along the scripted lines of Arpaio's ideology. Although Althusser would tell us that ideology is hidden to those inside of it, if Arpaio's ideology is hidden, it is hidden in plain sight. The simulacra of Joe Arpaio works by performing a world wide open and wallowing in the self-evident. It's time to put an end to the Wild West show. If you don't look, nothing is there.